Our first movie tells the story of a friendship behind prison walls that spans more than 20 years.
So welcome to episode 31 of Middlebrow Madness, an exercise in podcast hubris. My name is Derek Gade.
Derek, do you think that black cats are a source of bad luck or prosperity?
Prosperity. My late cat Celeste would be proof positive of that.
So you're saying that when you see a black cat down the street, you don't run away from it in fear?
Nah, if anything, I go closer to it because I'm a friend to the animals.
So you're saying that you stand silent and marvel at the beautiful creature that it is?
In a manner of speaking, yes.
That's great. Because I have some information from a website just to tell us more about black cats, tell us how much we like them. I'm going to withhold two things. Number one, I'm going to withhold what website it's for. And then number two, I'm going to withhold what the title is. Because that's a delightful little not amuse-bouche, the opposite of that.
It's a dessert.
Thank
cherry
you.
On top.
Perfect. That's what you would say if you prepared this bit. So let's begin. Superstitions, legends, myths. Historically, so much of what we believe comes from our individual origins. Whether we hail from Germany, whose legend suggests that if a black cat crosses your path from right to left, you run away, or Japan, where it is said that a black cat brings prosperity if you run towards it, we often acquire these superstitions at an early age and hold them throughout our lifetime. Do preconceived generalizations of black cats affect their adoptability? Black cats. That's another subheading. Shiny, soft dark fur that accents their mesmerizing yellow eyes. Silent, sleek. Cats that can sneak up on someone in surprise and scare. Some of us embrace their stealth-like qualities while others consider it deceptive. Dare we say witch-like? New heading. Incentive to embrace or adopt. That one's not as interesting, so we're just going to go to the next one.
Okay.
At the end of the day, these cats are like every other cat. They're living, breathing creatures that need nourishment, shelter, and love. Which I agree with.
Yeah.
And at the end, it just says, there's going to be a punchline here, don't worry. It's not just...
I got waiting for the other shoe to drop there, Isabelle.
So, when thinking about cat adoptions, please consider one of these. Super cute, legendarily beautiful, mythically entertaining, felines. Those are all line breaks. And then black cats, perfect. But it's spelled purr. I'm not going to do that because I'm an adult.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So now here's the fun part. Two things. We're talking about black cats and what it means to adopt a black cat. So I want you to come up with a title for me. And I want you to guess, where could I be reading this pro-black cat adoption article from?
You want me to title this article and say where I would be able, like...
Where you would publish this.
Okay. Like, I would probably title the article something like, Black Cat, same as the other cats, except blacker?
Okay.
Or some such...
You got the first part right. It does start out black cats.
But I would be something like, have you considered black cats, ? In the sense of, like, these cats are just as nice as any other cats, because there is, like, legitimately, like, black cats get adopted less because... There's the superstition associated to it, whatever. Where I'm going to be a dunce and play along with the bit and say that I feel like this would be something that you would read in like a Humane Society pamphlet or at the SPCA, or maybe a mommy blogger would post this after they adopted a little cute black kitten.
I mean, I like all these ideas. I like where you're going with them. It's stupider than either of those things. Don't worry.
Okay, well, I suspected as much.
So the title, you got the first part right. It's just black cats, period. And all that entails...
Oh, boy. really loving the puns, huh?
And it's for the blog on the separate website that Chicken Soup for the Soul made for their pet food.
Oh, boy. Wait,
did you know that Chicken Soup for the Soul's pet food has a blog? Because
No,
I do now.
I didn't even know that there was Chicken Soup for the Soul branded Pet food.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone knows that, I thought, right? You got chicken soup for the pet. If you got chicken soup for firefighters, and you got chicken soup for teens or whatever, you got chicken soup for prisoners and chicken soup for murderers that haven't been caught yet. That's the subtitle of it. You got to have chicken soup for dogs. It's not chicken soup though, which is
but dogs famously can't read.
Who am I to judge a dog that way? Okay, hold on. I spoke too soon. Chicken Soup for the Soul does make a grain-free wet dog food chicken recipe stew. I apologize, Chicken Soup for the Soul. I was underestimating you as a company, as a brand, and as people.
Wait, did you say that they make dog food flavored human food?
No, they make dog food that is like flavored like human soup. It's like a soup can, and instead of being wet food like you usually would have, it's just soup for your dog. Which is a concept I like a lot.
Soup for your dog. Well, this is slightly less insane now that I've just remembered that there's I forget the brand. It's probably like Purina or some shit. They have these little novelty food containers for cats that they call little soups, which is more or less just wet food.
Huh.
So
that's
And also they've got like cat barbecue. They call it little grillers. I guess it's supposed to imitate
That's wonderful.
I think it's supposed to imitate like grilled chicken or grilled fish or grilled the food that you normally get as cat food. So like chicken and turkey and fish or whatever. There's not a million ways to do pet food.
I mean, you could make it for pets. You can make it for people. You can do a lot of things with pet food. That's the two things I have off the top of my head. But
you could eat it on a dare.
You can do lots of things that I should talk about on my other podcast with pet food. But
oh boy, for a good time every other week.
This all led me to because obviously, like you're searching for chicken soup for the soul pet food.
Oh, so it wasn't a moose-bouche.
Now it is because I want to do a little more interesting reading, which is I want to talk about some Goodreads 5-star reviews of the Chicken Soup for the Soul book. This is only the first one. We're not going into the whole series.
Okay. Oh, Goodreads, the famously, well-spoken, well-argued masters of prose that are the reviewerati at Goodreads.com.
I mean, it's for only the most refined tastes,
of course.
So the first one that I loved, this is from someone calling themselves Bogdan. But I'm pretty sure it's from Jacques Derrida, because it says, everyone finds his own interpretation of the information read here. If you seek for answers or opinions, you will find them rather different. I like the book a lot and will turn back to it many times more in the future. And now I'm fascinated with the idea of difference applied to the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. And I love the philosophical aspect of that.
Like no one sees the same book or gleans the same information?
There's an infinite number of readings involved, and the marginal always imposes itself on the main text. It's like Pharmacon when you think about it.
Pharmacon.
Laura says that unfortunately, I had to throw this book away after reading it. I'd worn it out. Whole sections could no longer be held together with tape. Even though this was a rereading, and many of the stories have become way too familiar over the years, parentheses, the starfish story. We all know the starfish story from Chicken Soup for the Soul. The story still had the power to make me cry, even in front of my students, who were silently reading their own versions of Chicken Soup. I'm buying a new copy for next year. I love it because it's nice and dystopian. This idea of this, I'm sure a very nice lady. She's some situations where she has students, and she's having those students read Chicken Soup for the Soul, which I think should be illegal. Have you read any of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books? I'm just wondering.
No. I've seen them around like my grandparents' place, but I ain't ever read them.
I've read them because the church I went to when I was a kid had like a separate house that I don't know why. But like they had like a library there, and that's where like the youth meetings and things were. And their library was all Christian books, obviously. And once you've read the Left Behind series, there's not much else there. So you got to go with something. And Chicken Soup for the Soul, it was was one of the better extrapolations of that concept. I would have to look up a full list of all the chicken soup for the soul books. But my brother and me has already done a bit on that, so I don't want to just repeat that.
Right.
It is the most lukewarm water I've ever drank through my eyes.
I mean, I suspected that it was sort of tepid, folksy advice cover to cover.
I'm not even sure advice is the thing I'd say. I'd say more inspiring
Parables?
stories about the Lord.
Inspiring story. Okay.
But like when I say the Lord, it's a lot more like subdued. It's just like this is subtextual Lord.
Okay.
It's a lot like that TV show Early Edition.
Angel? Oh, okay.
No, Early Edition.
Yeah, this is not the first time you've mentioned Early Edition on this show.
I'm not surprised, actually, now that you say that. I was like, oh, Derek, I can tell you about Early Edition, but of course, I've already talked about that. But, and I cannot talk about it more because this is not an Early Edition podcast.
It is not, though such a thing probably exists.
I'm going to Google that while you tell people what we actually are.
All right, we're actually a film podcast. Well, I mean, I keep saying that we're a film podcast, but every episode we record, I think we're a movie podcast less and less, and we're just sort of a talk about whatever podcast, a very discursive, wide-ranging podcast. This happens to talk about movies regularly. So in 2018, back when this show started, which this is the first episode that we are recording in 2021. So it's going to be nearly 3 years that we're going to be in the process of doing this show. But back in the halcyon days of the show, Isabelle brought to me a big old bracket with the top 250 films of all time according to the Internet Movie Database. And it was like, which one of these is the best? You want to help me figure it out? And I was like, yes, but only if we add 6 movies to it and make a bracket out of it. And that's basically what we're doing. We're trying to find the greatest movie of all time, asterisk. We are so close to the midway point.
We're getting there. We're almost there.
We are, and the halfway point of round 1 is going to be the 1/4 mark of our show. Episode 32 is going to be officially 25%. At the end of the next episode,
right? It feels like we just started.
1/4. So we're reaching a milestone. Next episode. Right now, this is episode 31. Who gives a shit? So
you can skip this episode. It's not important.
That's right.
Although what you should listen to instead is the Early Edition podcast. Not a great name.
Does it exist?
But it was 2015. You know, no one knew how to name podcasts back then. I'll be honest, I'm pretty disappointed. They only finished season 3. They never got to season 4. And their most recent post on their Facebook group was 2017, with the host telling the followers about a new podcast that the host or one of the hosts is doing.
Is it also about Early Edition?
It is not. It is called oh shit. This is a word I've seen before, but I never learned how to pronounce. Oh no. You know Frank Zappa?
Uh-huh.
Calliope. There we go. Did it.
The circus organ?
Yeah.
Calliope.
Yeah, I always thought it was like Calliopeia or something, because I didn't read it. I just looked at it for a second.
No, Cassiopeia is the name of a Japanese jazz fusion band.
I thought you were going to say a Joanna Newsom song, but that works too. So Kyle Chandler is not in any of the movies we talked about today, unfortunately. No, but there are some other stars, some other big names that we're also fans of.
Yeah, like Benjamin Bratt.
I like Benjamin Bratt. He's all right in Law and Order.
I don't really have a take on Benjamin Bratt.
Demolition Man.
Good working actor. Miss Congeniality.
Yeah, I was going to say Miss Congeniality next. Thanks for that. Catwoman.
I ain't seen Catwoman.
You ain't seen Catwoman? What are you doing with your life?
Watching a bunch of other movies that are not Catwoman, including these.
You know what? Now that you say that, probably making the good decision.
So yeah, every episode we chronicle 2 matchups in our bracket, and the 2 winners are going to face each other in the next round. So in addition to sort of working our way towards the greatest movie of all time, asterisk, we also set up the next round in a roundabout way. So this time around, here are our competitors. Witness for the Prosecution versus Reign de Basanti, and Coco versus Stalker. Kind of a grab bag, a nice spread of motion picture styles this time around. So first off, the 66 seed which is pretty high placement for a movie I never thought about before this pod. Witness for the Prosecution, released in 1957, directed by Billy Wilder, a screenplay by Billy Wilder, Larry Marcus, and Harry Kernitz, based on The Witness for the Prosecution by Agatha Christie, starring Tyrone Power, Marlene Dietrich, Charles Laughton, and Elsa Lanchester.
I'm shocked it's that high. I really thought that, like, if you would have made me guess, I was guessing, like, I don't know, like 170 something. That is wildly high for a movie that, like you said, I have never really thought about before.
Like, if you would have asked me which Billy Wilder movie is highest on this list, like, gun to my head, I would have said, like, 7 movies before this one. So, where was I? Oh, yeah. So, $2 million budget, $9 million take, and nominated for 6 Academy Awards, ultimately winning 0, but it was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Editing, and Best Sound Recording, versus Règne de Basanti, released in 2006, directed by Rakesh Omprakash Mehra, written by Rakesh Omprakash Mehra, Kamlesh Pandey, and Rensil De Silva, starring returning favorite Amir Khan, Siddhartha, Atul Kulkarni, Sharman Joshi, Kunal Kapoor, Alice Patton, and Soha Ali Khan. $280 million rupee budget, nearly $1 billion rupee take. I'm not sure what the rupee to American dollar conversion is, but that seems like a very impressive number.
I think I looked up, it was like something like 300 million.
That's not bad.
Especially for the content of this film, which we'll get into.
And nominated for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 Filmfare Awards, winning Best Film, Best Director, Best Actor, Critics Best Actor, Best Musical Director for A.R. Rahman, Best Editing, and Best Cinematography. Holy shit! So I think we're going to have, not to spoil anything, but I think we're going to have a fair amount to say about Règne de Basanti. So let's talk about the little legal procedural that could, Witness for the Prosecution.
Yeah, why not? Let's talk about that. It's definitely a movie where things happen.
It's a movie where things happen, and it's a case of it's a case of a little clockwork Hollywood machine kind of ticking along, doing its thing, and being quite entertaining in the process.
Absolutely.
And, and it's Billy Wilder, so, you got your good script going, and you've got your kind of crack direction going on at the same time. This movie kind of gets off to a rough start. And the blame can be placed squarely on the broad shoulders of one Charles Laughton.
Yeah, what did I text you when, this started? Was like, is this just a movie about a guy who's an asshole?
Giant asshole. Charles Laughton, obviously, great actor of of early to mid Hollywood, known to film dorks as the writer-director of Masterpiece, The Night of the Hunter.
Absolutely. Sadly, the only film he ever directed, but...
Yeah, and if that was any indication, I would have watched fucking everything he would have made. Which came out a little bit before Witness for the Prosecution, incidentally. So Charles Laughton's character in this film can charitably be called a bit prickly.
I was going to say prickly as well, so I'm glad you chose that one.
And basically, the entire beginning of the film is basically him leaving the hospital because he's got a heart condition. He's a cardiac, as they say. And he just spends the whole time fucking berating his nurse, which I was surprised to find out it was played by his wife, Elsa Lanchester, who was nominated for an Academy Award for basically being what we call in French a souffre-douleur.
And who you probably know as the Bride of Frankenstein.
That's right, the Bride of Frankenstein. So this movie was basically Charles Laughton being an asshole to his wife for half an hour. And then it kind of settled into the Agatha Christie thing. And this is what we come here for. And much in the way, much like Agatha Christie novels, this movie is sort of compulsively watchable. It's it goes down real easy. It's really fun. It's got twists and turns. It's got stuff that you don't expect. It's got twists. It's I hate this. I hate to say this like this, but it's kind of perfect for what it is. which is kind of like a late 50s Hollywood legal thriller. But eventually also Charles Laughton's performance kind of becomes not nuanced, but he stops just being a giant asswipe. So he plays functionally like a lawyer. And he's got like a heart problem. So his doctor's like, no fucking hardcore cases, bud. And he's like, rah. And that's basically what Charles Laughton sounds like. He sounds like someone stepping on a duck. But, that's not his fault. That's just his voice. So, but, along comes Tyrone Power, a guy with an awesome name that I'm surprised wasn't nicked by a star of porn. And comes in and he's like, oh, well, I've been accused, very genially says, I've been accused of murder, but I didn't do it, I tell you. And against his doctor's orders, he takes the case. And, turns out he's married to Marlene Dietrich, who's really good in this movie. Except for one part where she's not good, but that's on purpose, but we'll talk about it.
Yep.
It's this whole thing of like conflicting motivations, conflicting story. There's a will. There's Tyrone Power befriending an old lady who left him 5 figures in a will she had recently edited. Marlene Dietrich is like, you know what? Fuck my husband. And there's like sort of this political intrigue because this is the late 50s, and Marlene Dietrich and Tyrone Power got married in Germany. Marlene Dietrich is German, in case you didn't know. So there's a lot of intrigue going on, and it's basically it's a legal thriller. It's like, does this guy get off? Can Charles Laughton pull off a convincing defense, even though his ticker's gonna fucking give out? It's a really entertaining movie.
And I mean, when you think about it, if a porn actor had taken the name Tyrone Power, that's also going to be about whether he gets off. So that's why they pay me the big bucks, folks. By which I mean $0.
So, what did you think of Witness for the Prosecution?
I thought that the first 15 minutes were not good, and the rest of it was pretty darn good.
Yep.
I think that Charles Laughton in this is a spice. Like his assholeness is a really good spice. When the rest of the film kind of blooms around him and there's stuff going on, then his little asides are charming. But when that's all you're getting is just him being a prick over and over and over to people who absolutely do not deserve it, it's a little insufferable.
And that's the first thing that we start off with, that we don't get any shading to the Charles Laughton character until Tyrone Power shows up.
Yes.
Which is like 20 minutes into the movie.
But once it happens, I think the film really starts moving very, very well. I think that the thing I was a little bit pleasantly surprised by, I shouldn't be because it's Billy Wilder, like you said, but there's actually good shots in this movie and like interesting direction. And it's not just like a lot of other courtroom dramas, like even Trial at Nuremberg, which we talked about previously. That's pretty. It
feels comparatively staid.
Yes, this film has a lot more dynamism, and there's like that really wonderful shot when they're entering the prison for the first time, and it's angled up in a way that almost makes it look like a German expressionist film. Super cool shot, like very much like a shot out of M. I think that Tyrone Power and Marlene Dietrich, give their characters the kind of shading that makes it genuinely interesting to see where things go. Because Tyrone Power, it's clear there's something wrong with him as soon as he shows up.
He's way too G. Willikers golly G when he starts off. He's leaning on his innocence a little bit too hard.
Yeah. But as it goes along, at least like I was increasingly convinced, that was a red herring. There's something else going on here. And it turns out it was a red herring, but not for the thing you thought it was. And it's entertaining in the moment, but it also speaks to one of the problems with this film is that it has the same problem as a lot of Agatha Christie novels and stories, which is that the ending answer is not very satisfying. At least to me, it's not. It's like how at the end of Murder on the Orient Express, spoilers for Murder on the Orient Express, if you somehow don't know what happens at the end of that, hey, guess what? Murder? The entire train does it. And that's the solution. And you read that and you're like, what? I just read this whole story for this. And in this one, it's not as egregious, but the ending is just, they were all lying. And Marlene Dietrich and Tyrone Power are actually still in love. And they were both just lying for each other. Except
Tyrone Power was seeing someone else on the sly.
Yeah.
And they, like, in an act of what I can only... And what I can only imagine is an act of hubris that you can only do whenever you've just been acquitted of murder. You just kind of monologue with your side piece at your wife about how awesome it's going to be when they go, like, fuck in the Bahamas or whatever.
Instead of just being like, hey, get out of here for a couple minutes.
Just
I'm going to
fucking
deal
off,
with some
yeah.
stuff. But no, I mean,
or telling the other person to fuck off, yeah.
It sounds like he wasn't great at doing the murder either, so maybe he's just a bad criminal.
I think he may just suck, but yeah. So spoilers for Witness for the Prosecution. Tyrone Power gets fucking stabbed with he gets a bit of hair to the dog that bit him in the case of, but in this case it's a knife, and he gets in the abdomen, wielded by Marlene Dietrich.
That's the disappointing part, but the rest of it I quite liked a lot. Especially there was one part that I thought was bad until the things came later, and then I loved, which is I even messaged you when this happened. So there's a part in the movie where Sir Wilford Roberts QC, which is Charles Laughton's character, or Robarts, I'm sorry, not Roberts, gets a call that essentially it's someone on the other line saying, I have the evidence you need to sew up this case. Because right now it looks like they're going to lose. And he's like, okay. And he doesn't say that. He says it in a dickish way. But he basically says, okay. And they go down to a bar or like a train station.
But this person on the phone,
yeah,
and the person they meet at the bar has what I can only describe as like someone beating the shit out of a Cockney accent.
And I messaged you,
what
the
Europe.
Fuck accent is this person doing? Because it's like utterly baffling.
I think it's like someone doing a bad American accent, doing a bad Cockney accent.
Yes, 100%. There's like a bunch of like layers to it. It would also switch into like, I'd be like, is this like supposed to be like Polish? Or like what is going on here? And you find out later, boom, that was Marlene Dietrich. And she was just tricking Charles Laughton.
Doctored evidence.
Fabricating evidence to be able to make Charles Laughton be able to win the case, which gets Tyrone Power off. Which is her goal, even though he actually committed the crime, but these make him look innocent. And disgraces her in the process, which needed to happen in order for Tyrone Power to leave unscathed.
Easy to do to a German national in the 50s.
Yes. That's also one thing that it's not exactly a criticism, but I was expecting a little bit more of that. I even texted you pretty early on, like, I feel like there's a Nazi thing going on here. And there isn't really, besides that exact thing, which is taking her persona and her presence and using the fact that she's German, and this is set more or less immediately after World War II, as its own kind of like an explanation of why the jury might feel a certain way about her.
Right.
And I thought that was interesting, but I wanted a little bit more there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I felt like that would have sort of not impeded, but I felt like that would have sort of bogged down the specific energy, the Christie-esque energy this was going for. Certainly.
It would have made it into like a movie where there's like themes instead of being a very, very well done, clockwork little mystery.
That's right. And yeah, as is, it's like, this is a textbook case of what people might call a minor masterpiece.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say. Oh, I mean, I would say that, like, the last thing I wanted to say is I think a lot of my problems with this kind of film in general, and even to the modern day, like something like knife. I was going to say knifed. At first I almost said knocked out. Then I almost said knock knock. Then I almost said knifed out. But it's Knives Out.
Yes, Knives Out.
Which does some other things, but a lot of the criticisms I would have of that and this movie, you should read The Simple Art of Murder by Raymond Chandler, where he goes through a bunch of different kinds of detective fiction, like 3 different stages, and addresses many of the criticisms I would have. And also just Raymond Chandler, turns out, good writer.
Good writer, of course.
But I think I've said enough about Witness for the Prosecution, and I need to talk for like 6 hours about Rang de Basanti, because holy shit, is there everything possible in this movie.
If you are new to the show, if this happens to be your first episode, first of all, welcome. Thank you for choosing our little podcast to entertain you during these trying times. So a while ago, So one of the quirks of the IMDb Top 250 is that it's of course it's a lot of Hollywood stuff, it's a lot of American stuff. But one of the quirks of the list is that there are odd films here and there that neither of us have ever heard of because we don't really keep our ears to the ground when it comes to Bollywood cinema or Turkish popular cinema and those are the two big ones. It's India and Turkey.
Yeah.
And we stumbled upon, and this is how we got to cross paths with a little movie called Three Idiots, which runs really deep in middlebrow madness lore.
It was the first veto, right?
It was the first veto. It's the first Indian film that we covered on the show. And the first Indian film I've seen in a long time.
Same.
And I think probably at that point, the sort of archetypal popular Indian film that I had seen up until that point.
100%. I mean, I'd never seen a Bollywood film before.
Like, I thought it was, like, really interesting just because of the thing that kind of draws me, or the thing that interests me about this is, like, sort of the tonal whiplash. Isabelle adored it.
I still love that fucking movie. It owns. I'm really excited to like rewatch it. And a not insubstantial part of that was due to a man named Amir Khan, who is the best. He's wonderful. He's a
really good actor.
First of all, if you even mention his name on Twitter, a bunch of his fans will come to your mentions and tell you how much they love you, which is great.
It's like the K-pop hive.
I love it. Except they seem like they have more positive energy than the K-pop hive, at least from what I've seen.
Now you've done it. Now you're going to stick the K-pop stands on us.
Whatever. I like Blackpink, if that helps anybody.
I am familiar with Blackpink. I don't have an opinion.
And the thing that I said on Twitter, or not that I just said on Twitter, but I mean on Twitter I said he was like one of the greatest movie stars I've ever seen. And I really mean that in a certain sense that we don't really have movie stars in America anymore. We have people who are in movies who are very, very big. But there's no one who's like, I don't know, like Gary Cooper or like, you know what I mean? Like there's no one
like Robert Redford, Paul Newman.
Or, I mean, Tom Cruise is the last one still standing, really, right?
Tom Cruise is the last one. Yeah. He's the last of the bigs.
It's the last of the people who like you see on screen and there's just something about them. They have that thing that makes you go, that is the movie. This is who's here.
Well, this is the difference between Tom Cruise and Amir Khan. Tom Cruise has been embroiled in controversy because of, Scientology and this and that and the other thing.
Whereas Amir Khan has been embroiled in controversy because he owns and he seems really cool.
Because of his kind of political stances. And political stances that, by and large, reflect a, how does one say? Socially conscious, I don't know if I would go so far as to say anti-governmental, but definitely government critical stances. That, I mean, you're on Twitter. You've seen ostensible, anti-government celebrities and the stuff that they say. It's cringeworthy.
Oh, 100%.
Amir Khan seems like the real deal.
Yeah.
Because he puts his fucking money where his mouth is. And by money, I mean every single one of the movies of his that we've done on this show are a societal problem film. Three Idiots is functionally a fart comedy about how corrupted the Indian education system is.
Uh-huh.
Like Stars on Earth, which didn't make it to round 2, but still kind of left its mark, is a passion project that he produced and directed about how shitty teachers treat kids that have sort of learning difficulties. And now we have Reign to Basanti. Which is about how political assassination is awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so for those who haven't seen this film, essentially it is two parallel stories. It's about this woman, a British woman who's a film student who travels to India to document the story of 5
white woman, crucially white woman.
Yes, white woman who wants to document the story of 5 particular people from the Indian Revolutionary Movement. And at the same time as that's happening, she meets like a modern day, or at least like 2006 modern day, college kids, at least ostensible college kids. What did she look like? Like Amir Khan was like 40-something when he made this.
He was in his mid-40s playing 22, which is insane because he did the same thing in Three Idiots.
It's so charming. I love it. I love it.
It's so jarring. It's like there's like I think you would point it out in the chat. I mean, yeah, Amir Khan is great, but there's some strong how do you do fellow kids energy for someone playing like, half their age.
Like the leather jacket he wears all the time. It's great.
Oh boy.
And these two stories essentially like as all these students more or less that they the main characters is kind of ensemble cast of students. They're all pretty apathetic at the beginning of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's one who is in the army.
They're boozing and just hanging out, doing shit.
They all feel very dejected about the state of modern Indian society for reasons that we will discuss later in this discussion because I think they're fascinating. And through the process of learning to act in this movie and learning more about like these 5 people that they're portraying,
they get radicalized.
And especially there's one event in particular that radicalizes them, which I want to talk about more in depth, so I don't want to say it right now. But there's a specific event that radicalizes them. And essentially they go, hey, you know how the people we're portraying did a political assassination? What if... ... And I will... besides... Okay, I will say, just to get all my cards on the table, besides... one thing it does at the end that, in my opinion, kind of betrays the rest of the movie in a weird way. I fucking adore this movie. I think I might like it more than Three Idiots.
Oh, man. See, I like it about as much as I like Three Idiots just because there's so much to fucking wrap my head around.
Yeah, there really is. And it has the same thing where there's so many tones and so many different things happening. It kind of flips it, whereas Three Idiots was mostly a comedy film that had these other darker parts going on. This is mostly a drama film that has all these like lighthearted and kind of silly things going on underneath it. And
there's like a motorcycle race set to like fucking these like sort of driving sort of early 2000s guitar. It's scored by just an electric guitar. It's like yeah, and they're like, it has like it in the scene that might as well have been in Three Idiots. We are introduced to the characters of Amir Khan and what's his name?
Sharman Joshi.
That's the one.
Who also was in Three Idiots.
And we are introduced to both of their characters having a drinking contest on a ledge over a body of water. And the rules of the drinking contest appear to be lean back and drink as much as you can. First one to fall into the water loses. Yeah,
that seems to be how it works.
And, I mean, so the movie does a really good fake out at the beginning where it's like, it's in London, we're setting up the story. And it sets it up as like this white savior story, which you know it's not going to be. But Sue basically does nothing for the last 45 minutes of the movie. Other than, like, be worried and sad.
Yeah, which I think is actually kind of a really fascinating choice.
And I don't know if this is, like... I don't know if it's, like, an anti-colonial film, but it's definitely kind of a... I saw it described somewhere as a post-colonial film.
Sure, yeah. Where I think a lot of, like, assumptions from post-colonial, like, politics are already taken as given, and it's trying to do something with those in a really fascinating way.
Yeah. So, yeah, this movie starts with a white girl going to India to shoot this movie, and it ends with a brotherhood of radicals fucking Charles Bronsoning a guy on his bike.
It's quite a journey.
And I think we have limited experience, admittedly, with Bollywood films, and I would really like anyone who has more experience to chime in on this particular thing that I'm going to say. But if I had to describe Bollywood filmmaking in one way, because we've also seen, like, Gangs of Wasseypur. The name of the game appears to be escalation. We start at a place, and we just shoot straight up. We don't sort of ease into anything. We just aim the gun towards the sun, and just fire away, baby. No rules, just right. Just escalate. Just jam the gas and see where you end up. And while
it's such
that's
a different way of making movies than, like, we're used to. And I will say I'm starting to get accustomed to it, and I really like it. It's really cool. Like, it's really...
I don't think I'm
like, there's no
yet.
moment of this film that isn't fun. Or at least, like, interesting.
It's very interesting as, like, a cinematic object. But I don't think I'm at that point where you are, where it's like the exhilaration is still novel. As like a film, I still think that the whiplash is interesting, but betrays not a lack of control, but like a lack of like synthesis somewhere. And I think I'm still trying to get my bearings, which might explain why I'm consistently lowballing these compared to you. I don't dislike them at all, but they're a lot to wrap my head around.
I think it's a lot like, I'm also, this is a problematic film, but I'm a big fan of, I believe it's called 13 Hours. Is that the right number of hours? The
Michael
Bay
film?
film about Benghazi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it does a similar thing in a certain
problematic
sense.
Everything.
Where Michael Bay, there's not a single shot he can do straight. There has to be a Dutch angle on it. There has to be like some weird spinning. There has to be something going on. And this film's very similar. Like you mentioned, like even like second unit, like shots are like at wild Dutch angles and are like constantly moving. And there's super
establishing shots are at a Dutch angle.
It's great. And the end of 13 Hours does another weird tonal whiplash where it's this entire movie about, the guy from The Office shooting a bunch of brown people and how that's rad. But the end of it, all of a sudden it becomes a Malick film, and it slows down. It shows a bunch of like waving grass, and like it has, I feel like I remember a voiceover that might just be me recreating things in my head, but it is also this word. No, it's wordless. It's this wordless, really tender portrait of women going to these fields where like all of the men in their life just died at, and like sorting through the wreckage, and just spends time with them there. And it's this really strange tonal thing that I think is genuinely kind of fascinating. I think that movie's really interesting, but because I'm used to a lot of movies
Bay
like
is an
that,
interesting filmmaker.
He sure is. We should talk about Pain and Gain sometime. We should have added that to this list, which I think is genuinely a masterpiece.
It's really good.
It's real good. And way smarter than you probably think it is. But
go listen to the Stuck in the Middle with You episode about Pain and Gain.
But those tonal shifts and that kind of weird, like, never taking off the gas is something that I already look for in a lot of Hollywood movies. This is just kind of an extension of that and an intensifying of that I think is very satisfying.
It's everything happens constantly in this film. And
it's why I also love Exposure.
Another film that I have not seen because it seems daunting.
It's the quickest 4 hours you'll ever have.
I was going to say, that's like 4 hours and change, right?
It's wonderful. Everyone go watch Love Exposure by Sion Sono.
Good luck finding it.
You can. There's ways and means on the internet, but not that I'd be promoting those ever. So there's a lot of things that I really love about this movie that I kind of want to get into, but I don't want to,
by all means,
like political things especially, but I don't want to like just like bulldoze you.
I am perfectly willing to be bulldozed because I don't think, I think I've said everything I need to say.
Okay.
I think I said everything I felt. I mean, it's like, it's the same thing that happened to me when I saw Three Idiots. It's like, this is a really interesting movie. And this one is especially interesting because it's like sort of ripe with history, which you will now spill for us. So I don't mind being bulldozed in this case.
Yeah, some of this history I knew, a lot of it I didn't, and that's kind of what I really enjoyed about this movie, is that I think I can't say how education is in Canada, although I'm assuming it's relatively similar. We did not learn much about any revolution after the American Revolution. That was pretty much it, and they were like, oh yeah, the Russian Revolution happened, but, not much more.
We learned about how... I forget the name of the conflict where I remember where the fucking conflict took place. I'd be really embarrassed.
What happened in it?
The British beat the pants off the French. Is it the Plains of Abraham? What can I fucking remember?
I have no clue what you're talking about.
Hold on.
Was this in another country?
It's the Battle of the Plains of Abraham.
I've never heard of this.
AKA the Battle of Quebec was a pivotal battle. It was part of the 7 Years' War.
Gotcha.
It was part of the 7 Years' War. It was fought where Quebec City currently stands. And it was fought between France and Britain over the fate of New France, influencing the later creation of Canada. So, but the thing is, we don't learn about revolutions, period. We didn't learn about the American Revolution. We knew it was a thing.
Did you learn about the French Revolution?
No.
Wow.
I mean, we knew it was a thing, but we didn't learn about the French Revolution because here's the thing about Quebec's education. It's very Quebec-centric. It's very Quebec-centric. So much so that we didn't learn about the French Revolution. But we didn't learn about revolutions. The one revolution that we did learn about was the Quiet Revolution of the 1950s, which was more of a cultural revolution than an actual sort of armed conflict. But I digress.
Okay. But I think that's a short way of saying that I think almost everyone listening to this, unless they sought the information out themselves, doesn't know jack shit about the Indian Revolutionary Movement.
I don't know shit about the Indian Revolution.
I know Gandhi's a person.
Yes.
That I've heard of before. And I think it'd also be fair to say that at least in like North America, 95% of the people who know who Gandhi is couldn't tell you what he's actually famous for or like what era of like Indian history he's part of.
I could 100% tell you that I had no idea who Bhagat Singh was.
Yes, exactly. So the freedom fighters that they portray in this film, I'm going to be editing this a lot because I'm going to mispronounce like all of these, and I apologize ahead of time because even with practice, I'm not going to do great with these. So there's Bhagat Singh, Chandrit Shekhar Azad, Ramprasad Bismil, Shivram Rajguru, and Ashfaqullah Khan, or Ashfaqullah Khan. I'm not entirely sure. Oh, I actually didn't do too bad with those. I'm surprised.
Yeah, you seem to do pretty good, as far as I know.
I probably did terrible for anyone who's a native speaker, but hey, I'd never heard of any of these fucking people before, which is, I got to learn more about them, and now I want to learn even more about them, which is super cool. Just like a little thing for me as a Westerner I get to enjoy. But also, this film is so explicitly political and on its face political in ways that American films never are. Like it opens with one of these characters reading Lenin, like reading Vladimir Lenin.
Sure does.
And it doesn't shy away from the fact that these people were socialists, like all of them, which is such a fascinating thing that like even like when you learn about Helen Keller in American schools, you never hear that she was like incredibly political and like a communist and did a lot of union work and things like that. You just hear about the fact that you basically just hear like triumph porn for people who aren't disabled. And it's so cool to see a movie present that so directly because I can't imagine that ever happening in America. And then also be so directly in conversation with modern Indian politics. And this is the thing I know a little bit more about. For people who don't know, Narendra Modi is the current
Prime Minister
of India. And bad guy. He's a Hindu nationalist in the most severe sense of that term, in which let's say he would prefer it if there were no more Muslims in his country. And he was a member of the RSS, or this one I am going to fuck up, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, I believe it would be something close, which is a paramilitary like volunteer organization that is very famous for being some of the main participants in the Gujarat riots in 2002. Are you aware of this, Derek?
No.
So, this is going to be a bummer. If you can imagine that, ethnic cleansing is not a great thing. So,
oh no.
In 2002, so they're referred to as the Gujarat riots, but more accurately, they could be called the Gujarat pogroms. It began, it was like 3 days long. It began with like the burning of a train car, which killed some Hindu pilgrims. And there was a wide outbreak of violence, perpetrated mostly by Hindu nationalists, organizations, and the police. I'm not going to get into details because it's really fucking rough, but 1,000 people died. 200 approximately went missing, and at least 2,500 were injured. And of the dead, 790 were Muslim and 254 were Hindu. And what do you call it? Other sources? So like those are official sources, whereas other sources say that death tolls were probably over 2,000. That's really bad.
That is, yeah. Generally speaking, yeah.
Yeah, and now
something of a whatchamacallit, a crime
against.
What's it when you do a crime on humanity?
Something like that.
Okay. We'll figure it out. We'll hash it out.
The Prime Minister of India currently has often been accused of initiating that violence. And he definitely did condone it without saying as many words. He did it the way that Trump condones violence, where it's like... Yeah.
I was going to say, that sounds awful familiar.
Yeah. And the reason I think this is really important background information is that the film is very explicitly in conversation, especially with the RSS and Modi, because one of the characters in it is a character called Lakshman Pandey, who is initially a lower ranking, he's one of the goon leaders in the RSS equivalent in this film. I'm not sure if they actually are the RSS, but I don't believe they are. But they're clearly them. I don't think so. If you're familiar at all, it's clearly them. And he becomes disillusioned with them throughout the course of the film because he realizes, A, that Muslims are people, which is a great thing to realize. But B, he realizes that they're just corrupt and they're just there to make money and they don't actually care about India like they say they do. They really just care about lining their own pockets. And he also learns that like India as this concept is more than just Hindu nationalism, which is, it sounds cheesy when I say it, but like it's obviously a good thing to know. And the fact that it's Hindu nationalism,
something that a lot of people have not figured out.
Yeah, it's not good. This film, A, has that character. B, has a Muslim character in it who is very explicitly shown to be discriminated against and has this open problem with this character who very much hates him and is very much shown as hating him. And has some interesting dynamics with his family versus all his friends who are Hindu. I think, so there's a lot to like kind of dissect in there that I'm going to mostly hold off until we talk about this next round, preview of my vote. But the thing that I really want to point out that I thought was super cool and had a lot of things going for it was Amir Khan is Muslim. He doesn't play the Muslim character in this, but he himself is Muslim. And it's clear why this kind of story would appeal to him. And I think it's really fascinating, A, that essentially the biggest star in India currently is Muslim, because there is such a large amount of the population who is not a fan of that, let's say. And also just because it makes a lot of the politics in this feel incredibly urgent and incredibly like felt instead of just portrayed. And there's a lot of like little subtext things. Like I want to in the future talk about the way that it talks about nationalism, like in like India versus like nationalism maybe in a country that wasn't colonized, and how those things are pretty different. Like there's a really fascinating detail, which is that the reason Sue wants to make this documentary is because her grandfather was in charge of killing these revolutionaries. Right. Which is such a fascinating detail that there's a lot to talk about there. And the ways in which like the film very much talks about how it doesn't matter what you do. Like it doesn't matter how perfect you are. Even if you're this amazing fighter pilot who gives your life saving an entire town of people when you could have ejected from a plane. That's a thing that happens in the film. There is essentially like it's all set off by bad parts being imported from Russia to be used in planes because of some corruption. And those bad parts cause the planes to crash very often. And one of the friends is a pilot, and there is a point where he could have ejected from his plane as it was crashing, but he didn't. Instead, he stayed with it to steer it away from a town and saved, thousands of people. And the defense ministry instead says, no, he was a bad pilot and there's nothing wrong with the planes. And that kind of is what really sets like the ultimate radicalization to happen. And that is who they assassinate later, is the defense minister.
Because at that point, when the pilot dies, that's the point where the movie really starts to fucking snowball.
Yeah, it all happens real fast. And there's a line before that happens and a line after that happens that I think are incredible. One speaks to like the pessimism before it, and one speaks to like their radicalized like courage afterwards. Whereas before this really happens, at one point they're all kind of down because they just watched the end of the movie they made, which is pretty depressing. And they're all in a bar, just kind of sitting around. And a lot of the characters, but especially like Amir Khan, are being very pessimistic. And at one point, he says, and I wrote this line down because I loved it, he says, "Not even the street dogs will bark when we die," which is some metal-ass shit. But also, it speaks to like the like the nihilism and the disillusionment that was clearly felt in India at the time. I can't speak to now because I'm not very well versed in Indian politics, but at least at the time, and I think in most of the world, has been felt in the modern era because it feels so like there isn't anything you can do, and I think was definitely a huge part of millennial politics before the last couple years. And even now, is kind of re-emerging in some parts of the left that I don't like very much. But, so he says that before he gets radicalized. And then later, so they assassinate the defense minister, but then he becomes a martyr. So in order to clarify what they were actually trying to do, him and the rest of the group hijack a radio station. And explain what they did. And it's also when you learn that one of the characters whose dad was involved in this corruption, that character killed his dad. Karan Singhania kills his dad.
This movie goes places.
Yes. Which I want to talk about the David Berman parallels with that also later, but we've already gone an hour and 15 minutes.
The Silver Jews guy.
Yes, the Silver Jews guy, which there's a whole story about that and his own dad that I want to get into later. He didn't murder him, but there's a parallel. But so at the end of this, after they have been all like shot essentially, and they're going to die in this radio station.
They die in a fucking freeze frame.
They die in a freeze frame.
Like this is a fucking John Hughes movie or something.
But right before that, Amir Khan says, "My blood wanted to be free." Mm-hmm. What a badass thing to say. Like very metal, very badass, and also really expresses like the fact that there's a line repeated a couple times from the person who killed the characters from the Indian Revolutionary Movement, where he says, "I used to think there were two kinds of people who went to their death. One went crying and one went like silent. And then I met the third, and these are the third because they have the courage and they've realized that their life is more than just their life." The one thing I will say about this movie I didn't like is...
I know exactly what you're going to say.
I'm sure you do. So this is an entire movie where the point of it is the only way to make political change is violence, is a radical action, that they could not get things done through the system. And then in like the last 5 minutes, while they're doing the radio broadcast, the character who's saying those things, which is Karan, he says, "You should join the police. You should run for office. You should become a teacher." And it's like, motherfucker, we just watch the police, like, we literally part of the movie is we watch the police beat an old woman until she's in a coma.
Until she's in a coma?
Yeah.
How much do you want to bet this was a censor thing?
Like
the censor board is like, come on.
I would highly bet that exact thing. It's still disappointing because the end of it makes it feel like really like, oh guys, that's not what the entire movie's about. But I'm willing to like I said, take the rest of the movie as the actual point, and that just being, like you said, a censor thing. But holy shit, we've talked for an hour and 18 minutes.
The guy, well, you talked for mostly that, but the guy was also knew that his number was up, so maybe he was started saying stupid shit. Who knows?
Maybe.
So I think I'm going to adopt a position for my future decisions on this show. I think Witness for the Prosecution is a better movie.
Hogwash. Ridiculous.
I think Rang the Basanti is a better text.
It's richer.
It'll make for a better podcast.
Like, I still have so many notes that I didn't get to, and like I just talked for like fucking 20 minutes by myself.
And also this tease of like there's a lot more material here. I think I know whoever wins here probably goes down in the next round, so I don't feel too bad about letting a movie like Rang the Basanti go ahead, because certainly I'm not using a veto on Witness for the Prosecution.
Okay. Congratulations to our hero, Amir. We'll see you twice next round.
That's Amir Khan 2, David Fincher 0, just to remind you.
who's the real
congratulations to Rang the Basanti. I mean, we've seen like Stars on Earth.
You know, the actor is auteur. He's what, you know.
Well, I've never seen David Fincher act. The most I've seen David Fincher act is that one Polaroid that he took with Madonna in the early 90s when they were dating.
I thought you were going to say he acts like Alien 3 isn't a good movie.
I mean, a lot of people do.
Yeah, they're all cucks.
I have not seen Alien 3.
The Alien 3 assembly cut is the best Alien movie. And I realize I'm an insane person by saying that, but I need to.
I was gonna say that's. I haven't seen Alien 3, but that seems like an insane take to have like the fucking director's cut Moongoth alien be the number one alien.
I mean,
when Alien and Aliens both exist.
As the Moongoth here on this podcast.
Good point. Fair enough.
But congratulations, Wrong Basanti, and holy shit, we gotta talk about Stalker and Coco.
Okay, let's run through this. Let's set
Stalker
up the
wins
tail for
next
the tape.
episode.
Yeah,
we gotta do the formalities. Let's do it. Let's go.
Let's keep ourselves tight. 63 seed in this matchup. Coco. I'm on the disambiguation page. Yeah, it was higher than Witness for the Prosecution.
I bet it's not anymore.
Probably not. Because the thing with the IMDb list is that recency bias is a real thing.
Yeah.
Coco, released in 2017, directed by Lee Unkrich, written by Adrian Molina and Matthew Aldrich, starring Anthony Gonzalez, Gael Garcia Bernal, Benjamin Bratt, Alana Ubach, Renee Victor, and Edward James Olmos.
The very same.
But then again, who does? $175 million budget, $807 million take at the Academy Awards. And if I'm not mistaken, it was nominated for 2 and 1.
Probably what best song and best animated film. By the way, it did drop in IMDb Top 250. That's exactly
it. And it won both.
So it dropped in the IMDb Top 250. Do you want to guess what it's at now?
73.
75.
Here's the thing. Pretty good movie. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Versus Stalker, which is the 194 seed in this film.
Hey, Derek.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear a really good joke?
Uh-huh.
Stalker, huh? What is this? A movie about a guy who eats too much celery? So that one didn't land great. Do you want to hear another joke? Do you want to hear another joke?
Okay, if you must.
Stalker, huh? What is this? A movie about a guy who eats too much rhubarb?
You got another one in the chamber there, Isabelle, that you got to get out of your system?
Yeah, I figured, comedy rule of threes. Got to have one more to go.
Sure.
So, Stalker, huh? Is it a movie about someone, generally but not always a politician or finance person, who outwardly displays intentions they know to be false in order to further an unacknowledged and ideally unsuspected motive? Stalking horse. That is that reference.
Oh boy!
I love the phrase "stalking horse" because it gives me a very sinister image of like a sinister horse, like a horse with nefarious purposes,
like a horse with a lucha mask.
more like a horse. Like, did you ever? Were you a person who read the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books?
No.
Okay. Well, there's a story in one of those where there's a guy and there's a woman, and the woman can turn into a horse, and
cool.
The guy doesn't want this chicanery to go on, and in order to stop it, he like rides her home, and then like at night is when she turns into a horse. He rides her home, and then he puts horseshoes on her. And when he wakes up in the morning, there's just like a woman screaming in his barn with like horseshoes nailed to her hands.
Yeah, gross.
I think I messed up like half that story, but there's a really good picture of a horse in that I always imagine to be the stalking horse. Is this like is stalking horse a phrase that other people are familiar with?
I have no idea what the fuck that means. I don't think you've ever interrupted me for a bit while I was doing the tale of
I still have more to say about this bit. I'm also sending you a picture of this horse, by the way.
Oh man, me and horses,
This is the horse I imagine to be the stalking horse.
Huh? Looks like a horse with a plague mask.
Yeah. So I've always just heard I didn't know the term stalking horse until I started listening to a lot of political podcasts because they end up using it a lot because it's used for like politicians. Like Elizabeth Warren, for example, was a stalking horse. People are going to get mad at me for saying that, but let's be real. You know in your heart to be true. That's my Elizabeth Warren take. Hot takes. Derek, what's Stalker?
Released in 1979. Directed by the great Andrei Tarkovsky. Written by the Stugatsky brothers. Adapted from their own story, Roadside Picnic. 1 million ruble budget. 4.3 million ticket. God, the fucking just. I think this movie did well.
Yeah, sure.
Mixed reviews before, but it did fine. Reviewed kind of lukewarmly in 1979. Ended up becoming a genuine, bona fide, bulletproof classic and considered to be one of the great master Andrei Tarkovsky's best movies in a career full of them. Under the awards section, it says it was awarded the prize of the ecumenical jury at Cannes and the jury award special mention at Fanasporto. But I think this is, again, one of those movies with a long cultural tale. Let's talk about Coco briefly. So, you are famously allergic to Pixar movies.
I am. I'm not a fan.
I am not. I liked this movie. But this is the movie that kind of laid bare for me that, A, Pixar movies are formula movies. And not just in the sense that they're 3-act movies with, like, a structure and characters and motivations and all that. But, like, down to, like, the funny dog and the hero that turns out to be an asshole. This is basically Up, but they fucking
should have called it Down.
Because
Up is...
down into a hole where this joke belongs. I think, because it's a formula movie, but I think, I don't know, it's a formula, at least, that works 100% on me. In the sense, these Pixar movies are very good at tugging at your heartstrings and making you feel things, or at least making me feel things. And Coco was absolutely no exception. And there's this, it's also compounded by the fact that I'm kind of powerless against movies whose central theme is music has the power to move. Music is a transcendental good in the universe. And this is partially what this movie is about.
I agree. That is what the movie is about.
Gal Garcia Bernal, get that check, I guess.
He does good work. I think he's the best character by far. Like,
I think he's the best
character. I really like
character.
Hector. He's so interesting.
Hector! I'm gonna roll those R's because I can.
I can't. So I'm just gonna. But I already said this to Derek before the podcast. I don't want to say Hector and sound like that.
You don't want. Do you not want people to Hector you?
So Hector is by far the most interesting character in the film. He has the most like depth and layers going on there.
Quick plot synopsis.
Sure, why not?
Kid in a family who has banned music for reasons.
God,
ends up in the land of the dead because of reasons, and has to get back, and has enlists the help, but is sort of. The story doesn't fucking matter. This is about the colors and the visuals and the songs and the fucking emotional climax at the end. It's a gorgeous movie that you've seen 100 times before because this story is dirt simple. I mean, the fucking main song that won the Oscar isn't even the best song in the movie because that movie sounds like it was written by the people who wrote Let It Go, and there's something about these fucking theater kid songwriters that rubs me the wrong way, and I don't know fucking what. The song sounds 100 times better played on an acoustic guitar than it sounds in its big rendition, and it's not even the best song in the fucking movie. But yeah, the animation is really good. The City of the Dead looks fucking magnificent. It's good. It's really good. Watch it with the kiddies. It's a good one. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing to fucking say about this movie other than, like, it's a good looking Pixar movie.
I liked this movie generally. That's my short version of it. Like, I have no strong feelings one way or the other about it. I thought it was, like, as far as Pixar movies go, it was middling. Or sorry, I should say, as far as real movies go, it is middling. As far as Pixar movies go, that means it's pretty much top tier. So, really good on that hand. And I like the music quite a bit. I like show tunes. So, like, I'm cool with that.
It's not something you grew up with. I mean, it's like, I'm convinced in my heart of hearts that, like, show tune shit is an American thing.
Probably. I mean, I'm American, so's Juan. That's 2 points of data.
Yeah,
that's a 100%.
Yeah, I don't know, like, I mean, this is probably just the crowds I run in, but like show tunes, musical theater, it's like a niche thing, right? Whereas I feel like in the US, it's a lot more mainstream.
But, like, in high school, did you not have like musicals that everyone performing?
We had drama.
Uh-huh.
Where we did, like, Ionesco and Moliere and shit.
Yeah.
We had band, but there was
never
no
the Twain shall
musical.
meet.
Never the twain shall meet, and if it did, I would have stayed far away.
Oh, see, like in my high school, there was 4 plays that got done a year because there was 4 quarters, and the last quarter was always a musical every single year.
Okay. Now, I never did a musical play.
All 4 years, 3 of the years, I played in the musical. I wasn't one of the singers. I was in the pit orchestra. That's actually why I learned to play banjo in the first place, because we were doing Chicago, and they were like, "Hey, we need a banjo player." And I was like, "I can play banjo. Why not?" That's a real fun show to play. Just if anyone's thinking of playing like banjo in their high school production of Chicago, go for it. And then also all the choir kids were super big musical theater people, and I hung out with a lot of choir kids. So at a certain point, it just becomes like a thing you're around all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, I like musical theater. Not as much as other people, but I enjoy quite a bit of it. And what I'll say is that this movie, I liked the parts where people are talking.
Yeah, pretty good script.
Yeah, it's a pretty good script. I think that like the family dynamics are actually pretty interesting, even if I think their ultimate message kind of sucks. And the action sequences, I hated, because I think they're always bad in Pixar movies.
They're not actively bad. They're kind of ho-hum.
They feel so obligatory.
Like the set pieces are like whatever. I mean,
it feels like, oh yeah, we got to have like things to like make sure kids don't like turn off this movie. I guess we'll do like we'll throw someone off a building, I guess.
Well, the set dressing is so impressive, but I don't know how much that hooks like a kid.
Is it?
I think so.
I found
like, especially in the City of the Dead.
I found the City of the Dead like super nondescript. Like I think it looks pretty, but I don't feel an identity for it. It didn't feel like, oh, here's like I get this place. Or even in like Monsters Inc., which I was also relatively positive on, I feel the sense of place. I didn't really feel a sense of place here. Like I couldn't tell you what the defining attributes of the City of the Dead are. There's a couple good jokes about it, like when, as an excuse, what do you call it? The kid, Miguel says he has to go to the bathroom. And then as he like walks out, they're like, should we tell him there's no bathrooms? Which is, funny little joke. But as like a whole, I couldn't tell you what the like guiding idea of the city was besides, I mean, even I was going to say besides like Dia de Muertos, but like it doesn't even really feel consistently that to me. But I'm also like... No,
only because the characters are like skeletons.
Yeah.
But I think the way that I would describe it, I mean, they're not... it's fine.
They're kind of boring skeletons,
but, like,
in my opinion.
They're skeletons that like wear clothes and shit, and they discombobulate each other all the time.
I like the discombobulation. That was good.
I like the censored dirty song that Gal Garcia Bernal sings to his buddy.
Yes.
That disappears. Turns out the dead can die. Oh, no!
When they're forgotten. Which, like...
that's so heartbreaking. What the fuck?
So here's what, like, the emotional through line here. I have some mixed feelings about. Number one is I like the story between
Miguel and Hector.
Yes, but also
Hector and Imelda.
I believe that's, hold on, the really old lady who's still alive.
Coco.
Yeah, Coco.
The titular Coco.
Fuck off. Yeah, Coco. God damn it. Yeah.
When she lights up at the fucking end of the movie, that's good shit, man.
It's pretty good shit, even though to me it did feel still a little like, this is like manipulative. But I mean, that's what
Doesn't
movies
matter.
are.
It's a movie. It works.
So it's fine. But like, yeah, that last scene did get me like a little choked up. And I was watching it with Julie, and she definitely got pretty choked up with it.
Yeah, I had to flip the counter back to 0.
But there's this bigger. Maybe this is because like I perhaps have a strange approach to like how I've always viewed family, which is that like I love my parents. Hi, Dad. Sure. I love you. I've told you that many, many times, so I think you're aware of it. But I don't love them because they're my parents. I love them because they've treated me well and I like them. I have an emotional connection with them. Like if a person was to come to my door and say like, hey, here's proof that I'm actually your sister you never knew about. I'd be like, okay, fuck off. Like that doesn't matter. Like that means nothing to me. Like, okay, I've never met you before. You're just a stranger. The fact that you're a stranger who has like more similar genetic DNA to me, that means literally nothing at all. It's also one of the reasons that like I'm not an adopted person, but I know plenty of people who get adopted like want to meet their like biological parents later. I've never understood that for the same reason. I'm like, you didn't hang out with them, you didn't like get to know them, so like, what's the point? But I mean, I'm not judging those people. That's just more like me saying internally that is how I approach that situation. So the idea that essentially family is the most important possible thing, and that if your family asks you to give up on the only thing that makes you happy, you should do that. And of course you don't have to, because at the end, like your great-great-grandmother is like, oh no, it's okay. You don't have to give up music anymore. But your grandmother did break your fucking guitar and was attempting to do that again before your father stopped her. Like, sorry, grandma, fuck off. You seem real shitty, and I don't want to deal with you.
I mean, the most tenuous thing in this movie about the City of the Dead is the family that hates music.
Yes. Like,
I will say that.
I almost wish there was more at the front end to make me understand why Miguel cares about these people, because they all seem to fucking hate him. Like, they all seem like terrible. Maybe I'm being overly harsh, but
I don't know. It doesn't seem like a stretch to me for like a kid to like place value in what his family thinks, even though what his family thinks is fucking stupid.
Yeah, and I guess it's like it's it is what it is. So that was one of the other reasons it didn't really quite work for me. And like I said, the action is terrible. But I think like as far as if I'm gonna throw on a random Pixar movie, it's gonna be Finding Nemo. But if I don't get that option, Coco is pretty top tier for that thing.
The thing that the City of the Dead reminds me of is like a giant multicolor melted wax candle.
Okay, I conceptually I like that.
It looks like sort of a giant gravestone accoutrement with your candles and your flowers and your whatnot.
That's definitely what they're going for. I just didn't quite feel it. But hey,
all right. So congratulations. But I believe Stalker is going to go on. Let's talk about Stalker real quick.
Yeah, let's talk about Stalker.
One of the greatest movies. Let's talk about one of the greatest movies ever made. Let's talk about Andrei Tarkovsky's masterpiece of metaphysics and want and failure and perception
and faith
and faith and hope and togetherness and danger. And it's got everything. It's a movie that has nothing and yet has everything. What is this movie about? It's three dudes who go somewhere they're not supposed to.
Three dudes who take a walk.
It's an escort mission. Three dudes who take a walk. And this is a walking simulator. This is what it is. And yet, inside this walking simulator contains sort of, it contains a kaleidoscopic soul.
Like, kaleidoscope is almost like one of my favorite ways to say that, because any angle you're looking at this, you can get something from it. And that thing is probably going to be pretty profound.
It's so gorgeous. The mise-en-scène is awesome. The sound design is fucking excellent.
There's never been a movie that like has no special effects, but feels entirely alien and creepy.
It's the softest of soft sci-fi gimmicks, but it works 100%.
Yeah.
If you're not sort of taken off balance by just the dunes inside where the like inside the zone, inside that building towards the end, I don't know what to tell you, man. It's like you're watching the Stargate sequence. It's like, I get it. It's like, no, you don't understand. They didn't have anything to do this with. I still can't figure it out.
It's wild. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's also like haunting and like genuinely frightening at points. Like when they're going through the meat grinder, nothing happens, but it's still like so unbearably tense the entire time. Tarkovsky has been criticized by people who are terrible for the fact that he's slow. And he lets things sit and he gives them space. But
he does.
This movie feels real brisk for being like 2.5, almost 3 hours, right?
Yeah, nearly 3 hours, yeah.
Feels like it just moves. Like there's not a single point where I'm like, okay, we can move to the next shot. I'm a little bored. I want to move to the next thing. Which even a lot of slow cinema directors I like I love Bela Tarr, but there's definitely shots where I'm like, okay, Bela, I get it. Let's move forward. We got it. he just like creates this pure mood and like sense of place that gets you mentally in the right state of mind to just sit with these scenes like how you need to.
Tarkovsky seems to me like a very intuitive filmmaker. He's got like these incredible instincts for like shot length, shot composition, like vibe, pace, all these kind of like not intangible things, but like letting everything kind of breathe when it needs to. But there's like a shootout in this movie.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, it's an action set piece in a movie that's 2.5 hours long, but like this movie takes as much care doing its little shootout than it does just running water or oil mixing with water for effect. At least I think it's oil and water, or it's like tar and water. Yeah. It's something.
Mm-hmm. It's fucking gorgeous, and also like disturbing and upsetting.
It's got like this hum of intensity the whole way through.
It's also got jokes, the bit with the phone,
dark ass Russian jokes. But yeah,
the bit with the phone is fucking funny. For people, let's actually say the plot of this movie. For people who haven't seen it, it's set in a country. It's unreal. I think it might be specified in the movie, but it's like a fictional country or whatever it is. But it's vaguely Russia, and something hit the Earth X amount of years ago. People theorize it's a meteorite, but the more you go along in the film, the less likely that seems. And the assumption is maybe it was something extraterrestrial or supernatural. But in a certain perimeter around that site, just weird shit happens. And it's incredibly, incredibly dangerous to be there. So there's these people called stalkers, who their job and like what they've like trained for like years to do is to be able to navigate the zone, as it's called, relatively safely. And the reason people would want to go to the zone isn't just like tourism, it's because there's supposed to be something there. Like if you reach this room where this thing supposedly dropped, then you'll have your wish granted, like your innermost desire, essentially. So one of those stalkers who is on one last job, like his wife already told him, like he
has everything.
Like you already said that you weren't gonna do this anymore after you got fucking caught the last time, because it's also illegal to go in the zone. And he's like, yo, I just gotta go, like chill or whatever. And
the zone beckons.
He escorts two men, one that is called the professor and one's called the writer.
Sounds about right.
And they just walk to the room and they come back home. But in the middle, everything possible happens.
Yeah, this for a movie with nothing, a lot of shit happens.
Yeah. I mean, like we said, there's so many different ways to tackle this. So there's 3 different ways I've thought about approaching this, but I'm going to choose one of them and save the other ones for later, because I bet we're going to be talking about this movie quite a bit. So
sure.
The theme that I'm really interested in today is there's a lot of discussion of words in the film and how giving names to things essentially stops them from existing, or like stops them from existing as a living thing and crystallizes them, or like puts them in the zone. Like they are now bound by very certain parameters. There's now a circumference to that idea. And that comes up a couple of different places. Number one is very early on, the stalker is saying like, people don't come here because of their fear. And the writer says, what do they fear? And doesn't get an answer. And it's because the thing at the center of, this zone is in some metaphysical way related to God. And there is no word. Like we have this word God, but like that's not the name of God. Like you literally can't even like say the name of God in like Jewish teachings, like Yahweh.
Like it doesn't convey what
approximation. And later on, the stalker talks about music and calls it sheer sound devoid of any associations, and talks about how still it ends up reaching our hearts better than like words do, better than books and paintings and things like that. For some reason, this sound, this unnameable thing, one of the hardest things to describe, actually. Like if you read a lot of music criticism, so many of the words that we've come up with are textural and visual, because like sound is such an abstract thing that like it's really difficult to have terms for certain kinds of sounds.
Yeah, we can only really describe how it makes us feel, right?
Yeah. Like you can say it's like, oh, jangly. Like okay, what is like angular? How is music angular? Like that, a lot of those terms you hear so much aren't really describing the sound. They're describing an evocation that the sound creates. And so much of this film is about belief in God and why so many people seem not to need him anymore. And that's actually like the most heartbreaking line in the film later is that, to me at least, is the stalker after he gets home is crying in bed and he's talking about like how awful this trip was. And essentially like the last thing he says more or less is what's most awful is that no one needs it, with it referring to hope, referring to faith. And the reason they don't is because these two characters, the professor and the writer, like the writer explicitly and the professor in not so many words, they are people of confined ideas. Like the writer literally writes words. The professor has this scientific framework, this normative kind of, I'm trying to come up with the Heidegger term, but I can't remember it. Not Heidegger, sorry, Horkheimer. Not important right now.
I can't help you.
But the bigger idea of it is that there are things beyond us that there aren't words for. And
sure.
That exists not through being able to explain it to someone, but through showing them and through them experiencing it and them feeling it move through them, which is, one of the, I think, more important ways one might recognize God, I guess. Not to like do that for the second fucking week in a row, but turns out I think about God a lot. Imagine that. And
there are themes you keep returning to.
Yeah. And there's a set of lines in the middle of the film that I think we both love, which he said, the stalker says, "Let everything that's been planned come true. Let them believe and let them have a laugh at their passions, because what they call passion actually is not some emotional energy, but just the friction between their souls and the outside world. And most important, let them believe in themselves. Let them be helpless like children, because weakness is a great thing and strength is nothing. When a man is just born, he is weak and flexible. When he dies, he is hard and insensitive. When a tree is growing, it's tender and pliant, but when it is dry and hard, it dies. Hardness and strength are death's companions. Pliancy and weakness are expressions of the freshness of being, because what is hardened will never win." Which, besides being like, holy shit, like, wow.
That's some good writing.
It speaks to the same thing. Like, once you define a term, you're hardening it. You're putting, it can no longer be pliable. Like you've defined it. We've put barriers around what this can mean. Whereas the actual experience of living in the world and the real vital experience, the living experience, can't have those barriers. And there has to be moments that you can't define and you can't even really speak to, but you can just be there with someone for. The stalker also mentions like how their eyes were prevented from recognizing him being God. And it's because of the way that they're trapped in their bodies like that, and they're trapped in these definable surroundings, and they aren't able to move outside of that. And the stalker is in moments, and that's why he can move through the zone, is because he can see things that the other ones couldn't see. I should let you talk for a little bit, because I've just kind of fucking steamrolled you, but the last thing I'm going to do... and I've steamrolled you twice this episode now, so I will...
it's fine, because the thing with being steamrolled by you, and I don't feel like I've been steamrolled, is that, well, first of all, I wouldn't even know how to like sort of express any of that in the first, in the first one, you gave context that I didn't know. And the second one, you're giving context that I didn't know or understand. So it's fine.
Okay.
Don't even worry about it.
Okay. Well, the last thing I'm going to do before I let we kind of, let you go and kind of finish this up is I want to read a short section from As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner, specifically in maybe my favorite chapter in the English language, which is Addie's chapter. She's dead when she's speaking. And for people who haven't read the book, Ants, when I say Ants, that's her husband, and the other names are her children. "He did not know that he was dead then. Sometimes I would lie by him in the dark, hearing the land that was now of my blood and flesh, and I would think, ants. Why ants? Why are you ants? I would think about his name until after a while I could see the word as a shape, a vessel, and I would watch him liquefy and flow into it like cold molasses flowing out of the darkness into the vessel, until the jar stood full and motionless, a significant shape profoundly without life like an empty door frame. And then I would find that I had forgotten the name of the jar. I would think, the shape of my body where I used to be a virgin is in the shape of a... And I couldn't think ants. Couldn't remember ants. It was not that I could think of myself as no longer unvirgin because I was 3 now. And when I would think Cash and Darl that way until their names would die and solidify into a shape and then fade away, I would say, all right, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they call them. And by the way, that break in the middle was there's a space in the text, like it's literally like a blank space because there's no word for it. Like she's talking about how when she would think about this name over and over, it would die. And the thing that, like the form it took would die. Whereas the actual being, like her blood married to the land and to herself and her children, there is no words for. It's beyond that. It doesn't matter what you call them. And now I've said my piece about at least this time for Stalker. And Derek, I want to hear you talk more about this incredible film.
Well, okay. So, rewatching a bunch of Tarkovsky films, well, 2 so far, it's going to be more later, has kind of thrown into relief the huge parallels that there are with the work of Ingmar Bergman.
Mm-hmm. He even used Sven Nykvist on his last film.
That's right. And I think that's is that The Sacrifice? Is that his last one?
Either that or Nostalgia. I forget which.
Anyway, I think The Sacrifice is Tarkovsky's Bergman film. But I think there's a lot of stuff in common here. The kind of sort of the agony of faith, as it were. But except the movies are like 3 times as long and operate weirdly frequently in the realm of sort of a genre, like historical fiction, science fiction, whatever it may be. You know how they say that talking about something you really, really like is more difficult than talking about something that you dislike?
Yes.
Which sort of which kind of ties into your point a little bit, because I know this movie's a masterpiece. I can feel it in my gut and my eyes whenever I watch it, and I can feel it whenever I process it. But articulating it is an entirely different deal. It'd just be me gushing about, like I said, the cinematography and the sound design and the mise en scène and the sort of the broad thematic ground that it covers, using sort of the humble science fiction story, and with very, very few moving parts. So it's as much an appreciation of it as a movie as it is as a piece of craft. Because let's not get it twisted. Andrei Tarkovsky is a fantastic fucking director.
Oh, incredible.
We've talked about this sort of at the top, and I think it's just as well that you went long, because it'll give me another 6 months to think about something smart to say whenever this movie goes up against Rang de Basanti in round 2.
That's gonna be a fucking long episode. But
yep.
These are actual quick things. Number one is that I just read this on the Wikipedia page. Apparently, Tarkovsky directed a radio production of the short story Turnabout by one William Faulkner. So that's a fun parallel that I had no idea before this moment.
Cool.
So, hey, who knows? Maybe he had that passage that I just read in mind.
Maybe.
And number 2 is I think like what you're speaking to is a lot of this movie is you have to experience it. You have to be there. You have to be in it.
The word for a lot of Tarkovsky movies, and this one especially, since it focuses on water so much, is elemental.
Yes. And it's a lot like, this is, I promise, I'm going to say a very fancy thing, but I promise it's actually very short. So,
sure.
Schopenhauer, his book Aesthetics, essentially defined like, what are you looking for in like a good piece of art? And his idea was a good piece of art lets you, for a moment, commune with what he called the will, which is essentially like the thing that underlies all creation. And for that moment that you were together with it, suffering is relieved, and you no longer experience the horrible pain of being human and being a self. Essentially, your body stops having friction with the world, or your soul stops having friction with the world, I think is the phrase that is used in the movie. But yeah, I think it's pretty clear that it moves on past Coco. But Coco, if you have children, I think it's a pretty good movie to watch.
Yeah, even if you don't have kids and you just want something.
Yeah, sure.
If you don't mind being devastated at the end or whatever, but whatever. So yeah, round 2, we're going to have Rang de Basanti versus Stalker. Oh, that's like 6 hours of material right there, boy.
Two great,
and that's just
rewatching
watching both those movies.
They taste great together.
I guess that remains to be seen. Do we read the letter? Do we just kick that can again?
We got to kick that can down the road. It's been like 2 hours. I have not eaten dinner yet.
Yeah, neither have I. It just ticked over to 2 hours now.
Okay.
If you like any of this, dear listener, do rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get podcasts. If you want to get in touch with us to tell us to shorten the fucking episodes, middlebrowmadness@gmail.com is our email address. Middlebrowpod is where we live at on Twitter.
We have a Discord.
We're actually also we have a Discord now. The link is going to be in the show notes.
We talk about heating up real dolls and how you're supposed to do it.
Yeah. I mean, some people do. Not everybody.
Only the truly erudite talk about that.
That's right. We're also on Twitter. Your humble hosts are also on Twitter. I'm at Derek_G. Isabelle is at Space Jam Fan. We're on Letterboxd at both those same handles. Do email us vegan and vegetarian recipes, opinions about the picks, Bollywood recommendations, and whatever it is that interests you. Really, I mean, we're here to read it all, assuming we can keep it under 2 hours next time. Speaking of next time, the matchups for that particular episode are going to be it's going to be a doozy. Asanzi versus The Third Man and The Godfather versus Close Up. And with those two, we will have finished 50% of round 1, 25% of the show. It's going to be a doozy.
Fuck. So
I think there's enough.
Oh, I do want to say I have a podcast. I have another podcast.
Right.
If you want to hear me only talk for 30 minutes instead of 2 hours, check out For a Good Time. It is a podcast I do with your friend and mine, Juan Marquin, about pornography. It is also part of the Noisepace.xyz network. But it's not just... It uses pornography basically as a launch pad to talk about A, like cinematic craft and how movies express themselves, and B, like cultural depictions of sexuality, like our own experiences with sexuality, and like how pornography, almost through being uniquely unself-aware as far as art forms go, tells us a lot about those things. But yeah, now I think we're all good.
All right, so all that's left to do is for you to say your name.
Oh shit, yeah. I've been Isabelle Arf.
And I've been Derek Godding. Have movies, be jolly.
Have movies, be jolly. Good night. We'll try to make the next one under like an hour 45. No promises.
The operative word there is try.
You still have to say goodnight.
Good night.